So yeah, I mean, and the other part is that this guy thinks that this theory then explains away, because they call it the British question, to explain away other questions. But when I have a
Right.
look at these bodies that they're talking about, like for example, this one we've been talking about, the Council on Foreign Relations. Okay, I mean, I'm looking at this guy David Rubenstein now, and like his entire family history is all about how important it was to him to be Jewish. Right,
Right.
it's like an extremely important part of this guy's identity and background, and presumably this leads into his foreign policy preferences and the
Yeah.
CFR's foreign policy preferences, and you
Yeah.
understand what
When
I'm saying, right? I mean, it's just like that to me has more explanatory power than saying, "Oh, this is a sneaky plan going all the way back to Cecil Rhodes."
Yeah, it's risible. I'd say one other thing that might possibly explain it. I don't know about Richard Poe in particular, but maybe other earlier, maybe. Well, I suspect you might agree with this. I don't know, but I suspect that the American state has encouraged, probably since probably since the Second World War, maybe further back, maybe a century, maybe since the First World War. I think elements of the American state and media have encouraged the idea of the British, if not controlling everything, at least being the rival or the enemy, or the British Empire is the thing that needs to be dissolved, right? And the remnants of the British Empire still need to be got rid of, I guess. Obviously, that was Franklin Roosevelt's intention with the Atlantic Charter, which Winston Churchill signed up to and then said wouldn't actually be implemented, but then it was, right? But the Atlantic Charter says basically the empires need to be dissolved. And we could all say, like a lot of people would agree that America has developed an empire of its own, but of course not formally. There is no entity called the American Empire. Nobody is actually, a subject state of them formally. They just have clients and allies who are in fact very subservient. I think it would have suited American imperialists or just American, expansionists through the last century to generally get ordinary American people, to have vague ideas that Britain is oppressive, racist, like all sorts of things, like controlling the trade routes, like stopping free trade or whatever, like all sorts of things. That Britain is in the way, the British Empire needs to be dissolved, right? I'd say these ideas do conduce towards that, albeit in 2025, what is left of the British Empire to still clear away, I don't know. But Richard Poe has stated his own reasons for doing that, which is the same as David Rubenstein, what you said a second ago. He cited his own ancestry, and he said he resents the fact that things that have been blamed on his people, as he sees it, that he would like to be blamed on us. It's bizarre. I take offence, at that title, how the British invented communism and then blamed it on his tribe. That's literally the title of his article.
But I also think it's important. I mean, I've always been against capital C conspiracy theory, right? Horace. I mean, like you can point to certain organized minorities, certain plans people make, but no one group is ever all powerful, or there's no like single mover in history. Okay,
No.
This is why I don't like the capital C conspiracy frame. And I'll just give you an example of what I'm talking about. Right, this magazine, Foreign Affairs. Okay. Now, from the way this guy's writing, it should be like, well, Foreign Affairs, that's the daddy, that's the flagship that controls American foreign policy. Okay. But if we're just serious for a second and think about the people who have published in Foreign Affairs, okay, I mean, the people who've published in there include Francis Fukuyama, okay, Mearsheimer, who you know about,
right.
Brzezinski, Christopher R. Hill, Hillary Clinton, Donald Rumsfeld.
Christopher Hill was a communist, by the way.
Right,
Sorry, go on.
Right. So the point I'm making is, okay, you could say, well, Fukuyama, Mearsheimer, Brzezinski are three guys with three, and another guy, Samuel P. Huntington, okay, and George Kennan, who we've already mentioned. These people don't all agree. They have very different visions of what the international order is, what it should be, what the aim is. I mean, they disagree. I mean, Samuel P. Huntington's Clash of Civilization and Fukuyama's the last man, the end of civilization, the end of history idea are completely juxtaposed ideas. Or Mearsheimer and Brzezinski, offensive realism for Mearsheimer, and of course the one world global hegemon under Brzezinski are diametrically opposed ideas. So I'm saying, what I'm saying is that, you know, it's possible to have a journal that is a sounding board for ideas that are not taken up, right? It's clear that the American government, up until fairly recently, has not been listening to John Mearsheimer, right? They've just not been listening to him. Or it was clear, for example, in the 1990s, that the establishment was more on the side of Fukuyama than they were on the side of Huntington.
Yeah, I think the CFR should be understood as something that American leaders can draw upon when they want to justify what they want to do anyway. It's more like that. It's not that the CFR issues doctrine and issues policy and nearly every politician dutifully picks it up. It's not like that. The CFR is there for them. It's constantly producing papers, I'm sure, and having conferences and stuff, at which, yeah, you can have Mearsheimer arguing with Fukuyama, arguing with Huntington and so on. But it's not that significant. It's just a think tank a lot of the time. And
But
it's just
a better way of putting it is well, look, okay, here are our top minds in the country. Brzezinski produces Plan A, Huntington Plan B, Fukuyama Plan C, Mearsheimer Plan D. And then they sit around and, well, which one should we go with? Which one are we more persuaded by? Or, okay, that strategy hasn't worked, we might adopt this one. You know, I mean, and you know, in fairness to America as a country, this is a kind of grown-up way of doing business for a modern democracy, if you want to put it that way. You know?
Yeah, we're actually, like, I mean, it's quite sensible to obviously have diverse views hammered out in one place or another, and to try and find some insight from the disagreement. The idea of continuous control by one force through history, that is kind of what perhaps separates capital C conspiracy theory from the rest, right? From what can be intelligent analysis. That's why I mentioned that Jim Marrs guy, because his book says that the same bloodlines or whatever, the same lines of control go all the way back to like beyond ancient Egypt. The same people have been in control. You think it's the British aristocracy, but actually further back, it was actually from Rome and further back through there. It's like, no, there are breaks, there are overthrows, there are just people dying out or becoming lazy and sloppy and just losing power.
The Iraq War was really about, fulfilling the prophecy of Amun-Re or something. It's kind of like,
or it was vengeance for some British defeat in Iraq in the First World War or something.
Yeah, I mean, one last thing I'll say is that it's not like there is absolutely zero truth to the idea that after the British Empire fell, in the 50s, I do have lots and lots of books on the British Empire here, and one of the books, which was written by this Marxist called James Hartfield, has this idea of the kind of a British establishment dream of exercising soft power in the world. Okay, I've got another book here by Tom Stevenson called Someone Else's Empire, right? And this is basically like an ambition that British prime ministers have. For example, like, let's take Tony Blair as one example. Okay, he has got this idea, or British prime ministers have got this idea that the way to have to it's almost like a cope in a way. The way to stay relevant, the way to still have a foot at the table, cling on to that UN Security Council permanent seat, right, back when Britain was a big power, hug the Americans close, so at least you can try to have some sort of say, right? This is an active, ambition that British governments have. But everybody knows that it's a kind of a cope. And even now, where we can see there's a divergence between Trump or an ostensible divergence between Trump and Starmer on Ukraine, I happen to think that they're much more closely aligned than it looks. But even now, a lot of people will very quickly, many of the same people who make these arguments will then mock Starmer when he actually tries to do something on the world stage, because it's obvious that Britain doesn't have a big army anymore, don't have a big navy anymore. We don't control a fifth of the world to 3/4 of the world anymore, right? So it doesn't mean it so what really was Blair doing, if you want to take that as an example, when he supported Bush on Iraq and Afghanistan? What he was doing was basically creating the semblance that America wasn't alone in the world, that there was an ally, that there was a kind of family of friends who's going to help defend the quote unquote free world, right? So it didn't look like America was doing unilateral action. That's really the role that Blair was performing. Now, as part of that, he had his own ambitions, he had his own ideas. And I mean, I have read that him, for example, was more neocon than the neocons. But this is also an element of empire, right? Where the vassals try to be more like the core than the core. Right. In fact, he started off with that idea of the Indians firing upon the Indians. But that was something that the Indians did under the Raj. They tried to be more British than the British, because that's their route to exercising a little bit of power in this system where Britain is the hegemon. And in exactly the same way, the vassals in the core tried to be more like America than America is, if that makes any sense. Now, at the minute, I think they're all being caught on the hop, because America has been woke and it's been left wing and it's been kind of all about the rainbow dildo for the past 10 years. And now it's switching to a different mode. In fact, a very good essay on this was by a Canadian, Mike from Imperium Press, Mike Maxwell, who, when the 51st state stuff came, he actually talked about the mentality of Canadians. And for them, they've always been like empire loyalists. They were loyal to the British Empire. And then when it switched to America, they actually have been pretty loyal to the American empire by espousing the liberal ideology of America in a more pure way than America. This is the way of signaling allegiance, if you want to put it that way. And he reckons now there's a switch. You'll see Canada switch, and in fact, it's already started to happen under Mark Carney, of all people, where he even like mentioned Anglo-Saxon heritage and stuff, which is something that even Trump has never done. So I'm just saying that there's another way of seeing this mechanism, and from the British point of view, I'm sorry to say, I mean, tell me if you disagree, Horace, it's just a cope, right? It's a cope from the likes of Blair and Starmer or Margaret Thatcher back in the Reagan days of trying to stay relevant. Right, there's only one big boy in town, so it's been the British strategy to be like, you remember, to be like the Richard Hammond next to the Jeremy Clarkson.
I think also, isn't it like they're sort of signalling to the American ruling class that they are still on their side, not on the side of the British people? That's sort of like the British ruling class signalling to the imperial centre, yeah, we're still on board. We're not, whatever our people demand, we do. We're not going along with that. We're going along with you. It's also that, right? It's like a sycophancy, I think. It's and like class solidarity across, which is appropriate for people who believe in internationalism, right? Who believe that they are in common with the rulers of other countries than they do with their own people.
And it's not actually. I mean, I always remember. I think it's in what was that Richard Curtis film? Not Adam Curtis, but Richard Curtis, where basically Hugh Grant plays Tony Blair.
Yeah.
Is it Love Actually?
Love Actually.
Yeah, and at the end, the British Prime Minister stands up to the American president, and everybody kind of has and I think that a lot of like Brits in their heart of hearts would love to see that moment where the British Prime Minister finally like finds his feet. That was like a kind of liberal leftist fantasy in George Bush era, because they hated Blair going along with all of that. But let's face it, when the power relations are as they are, it's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah. So Curtis was tapping into an underlying desire, wasn't he? Yeah, he's right. He's right to say that we enjoy that thought.
So I mean, I'm still extremely dismissive of this sort of material. I just think it doesn't explain anything. It's got all the worst aspects of capital C conspiracy thinking. And it just fundamentally ignores the reality that we've lived under our entire lives.
And it's kind of exonerating his own group, who have arguably, anyway, I won't go into that.